And now, live from Studio One in Castlebar, it's the Jack McDonald Show.
Yes, hello, it's the Jack McDonald Show. Great to be back. As I'm recording this, I am literally heading out the door, leaving for college in Dublin. So I'm going to make this short and sweet. You're in for a great show. We've got not only one, but two massive directors in the one interview. To be honest, I still can't believe it. And of course, I mean, not to belittle him, but we've also got Kyle Duffy. Kyle kind of comes across like an afterthought there. He's not. He's back with his film and TV torture, both subjecting ourselves to interesting choices and seeing what we make of them. I think Kyle fares a little bit better in this one than he has in some of the other weeks. Not too difficult to do so, though, I may add. So as I say, earlier on in the week, I caught up with Coodie and Chike, the two directors behind Netflix's Jeen Yuhs, the documentary charting Kanye West's life for the last 20 years. I'm sure anybody who has been listening to myself and Kyle talk about it for the last few weeks will know just how highly I rate it. I think it is genuinely such a massive accomplishment for the two of them to have pulled off. And when I heard Coodie's voice talking to me, it was so odd because I was thinking, no, you're the guy from the documentary. You know, it's a weird form of inception, and genuinely, as I made contact, I kind of thought, well, this is a 1 in a million, and then surely, piece by piece, it started to seem more and more real. And I say at the top of the interview, I genuinely didn't expect the two of them to join. I thought I was being pranked or something. So without further ado, Coodie and Chike. Well, guys, genuinely, I mean, it's an absolute pleasure. I was pinching myself all the time going, am I talking to the real Coodie and Chike, or have I just been duped? Genuinely, it's a pleasure to talk to both of you.
Nice. Thanks for having us, man.
Well, let me ask you guys, it's about 7 months on now from the release of one of the biggest documentaries, I think, of the year. I think that's a fair statement. How are you feeling?
Oh, man, I'm amazing just to see it all come, for God to bring, a vision to fruition. You know what I mean? After all these years of first working with Kanye and me and Chike working together as directors, it's just a special feeling to know that, that you can actually see something and it can become real. We always say, we read in Napoleon Hill's book, Keys to Success, if you can conceive and believe, you can achieve. And just to see that be a real statement is amazing.
Well, it's incredible as well because, of course, Coodie, you were there from what you could say the start. You pick up and you're on Channel Zero, and then ultimately you take quite a brave decision to bet on this baby-faced Kanye and follow him to the depths of stardom and fame and everything. But Chike, when did you join in?
I joined when Coodie moved to New York, and we got connected by a friend Yasmin Richards, who was a producer at MTV, who Coodie was helping them produce You Hear It First on Kanye, and they basically were utilizing all the footage that he had shot pretty much up to that point. It's just amazing, really, how Coodie's footage was utilized for so many different things. The same footage that he utilized for the You Hear It First that essentially, got Kanye national recognition is the same footage then that we used to make the video Through the Wire, our first video we did together, which then became the same footage that was so instrumental in his documentary. So it's just amazing that what Coodie set out to do, that footage was able to be utilized in so many ways and be impactful in its own rights in so many different ways at so many different times in Kanye's career, and our career.
Yes, and it's incredible as well because there is this real underline, this kind of vein of faith and Christianity going through, both all kind of people involved. And it's interesting, I'm not particularly the most religious, but there are some real interesting, I suppose, kind of links up, as you say there with the footage. There was a lot of different, I suppose, things that would maybe lead you to question, was God watching over on this production?
Yeah, man, God was in it from from the very beginning. We always say Jesus direct, because so much magic happened, even like just documenting Kanye and the things that would happen. You couldn't write. You know what I mean? Like it had to be definitely a higher power, which we call Jesus Christ, to do that. So it was God is always with us.
Chike, I was wondering from your perspective, of course, we see in the documentary that Coodie is very, very confident and kind of almost bullish on Kanye. Did you at any point go to Coodie? Are you sure about this guy? Maybe there's another fellow over there that seems to be doing a bit better.
Nah, not at all. Not with Kanye. Like from the moment that I heard his music, I was locked in on the mission. You know what I mean? We just knew that he was going to make a lot of impact. You didn't know how or what type of impact and how that was going to make, but his message and his music was so clear. And I guess with anything that's powerful like that, it's contagious. So you instantly are gravitated to it like a magnet. So it was instantly gravitated. I guess I would say I was gravitated to the same thing Coodie was gravitated towards. Coodie just saw it a lot sooner and a lot earlier and in even a raw state. But by the time it got to me, it was the same sort of feeling of like, I need to jump on board because you knew a train was moving. You need to go get up on it. You know what I'm saying? You
buy your ticket.
Yeah.
What I think as well is so fascinating about this particular documentary is you don't bother with talking heads. So, and quite common in documentaries, you would have a piece of footage and then you would cut to somebody and it might be their best friend or it might be somebody who met them once. And sometimes the perspective gained is really interesting and other times it can make documentaries drag on. But in this case, it was basically all as it happened. We followed Kanye from when Coodie met him all the way up to his presidential run and just a little bit afterwards. And at any point when context was needed, it was Coodie who gave the voiceover. There wasn't either of you or any of his friends sitting in a studio in Hollywood giving perspective 20 years later. And that was a bold choice.
Yeah, it was very intentional. You know what I'm saying? I know Coodie always envisioned it like that because that's the way Coodie used to even play the footage to people. He would just play the tapes raw and he always saw how engaged people were just in watching the content. And so, I mean, at one point, the only voice we thought about having in there was doing a proper interview with Kanye. And then we decided that, that wasn't necessary. And then what we did bring in later that wasn't thought of was Coodie's narration, which we kind of had to convince him so he wasn't really an advocate for it at first. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, I don't know why I was apprehensive on doing it, but it made so much sense. Our editor Jason, when he really suggested to me to do it, I'm like, okay, you're right. I should make that happen, and just to bridge all the gaps and really be able to tell the story because I was there the whole journey. You might not see me, but you see through my eyes. So,
Did you feel like perhaps, while you were a bit trepidatious about actually doing voiceover, was it because perhaps you felt that you would be damaging the credibility of the piece, that you wanted what you captured in your camera to speak for itself without you giving a voiceover?
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to tell a story I never thought of. Well, I guess, see, it's like we say, Jesus direct. So God, I knew at the time, but didn't know that I would be a part of the doc. I turned the camera towards me. I was in front of the camera often. My bad, I can't get this phone.
No problem.
But that, that was definitely something that happened after. God was like, okay, yeah, put yourself throughout, but I'm just a personality regardless. So
I think it would be remiss. One thing that Coodie was most careful about, just from being in the room when we were actually putting everything together with Jay Ivy, who wrote the narration, and Max, who was editing, was he really didn't want to speak for Kanye. So he wanted to be careful about his thoughts weren't coming off like Kanye's thoughts. And then when he did speak for himself, people have to realize like it's not like a Morgan Freeman doc where he's talking voicing over these animals or anything like that. Like he's speaking from a personal point of view. So there's a certain level of vulnerability that you have to be willing to express there and be okay with knowing like once that goes out to the world, that's out to the world. You know, we already know the internet. We already know how Twitter gets that. So it's just like a level of vulnerability in this day and age that you got to be comfortable with, because you just never know how that's going to be misconstrued once it comes to the public. So
yes, exactly. People could start to jump on top of you.
Doing that, yeah.
Well, it would be remiss of me not to mention Donda West, because I think for everybody, she was the shining star of this documentary. She was just perfect, really. You know, she just kind of lit up the screen. It was pure mother's love. Whatever race, nationality, whatever you are, that was your mother backing you. And, you know, the support she shows for Kanye in that piece really gives you such an incredible insight into Kanye West, the man, the character, the performer, you know?
Amazing, amazing spirit that was with us before and after she made a transition. It was amazing the things that would happen, that she would do, you know, within like her spirit. You know, I remember going through the tapes and I seen the giant looks in the mirror and sees nothing. I was actually licensing some footage for another documentary on Netflix, and when I seen that, it was like that was the first time I ever, after all these years, ever heard her say that, you know. And I forwarded it to Kanye, like, Kanye, your mother wanted me to send this to you. This was like a few days before, where he seen it a few days before he met with Trump in the Oval Office. And but it was like it was almost like to the point where I thought, did she say that then, or is she saying it right now? Like, because I'm talking about, I did a funeral presentation and don't recall ever hearing or seeing that giant looks in the mirror. And I'm just like, when I said that, and then of course when we started putting the piece together, we realized that it was the best. It was what needed to be heard to a lot of people, not just Kanye, you know. So,
and of course, she manages to, at times, I suppose, link you, Coodie, with the Kanye West train that's moving on, while it seems maybe Kanye isn't too focused on you or some of the other people around you. You kind of mentioned that when at times maybe Kanye wasn't always around, you were still hanging around or talking to Donda.
Yeah. Donda would often reach out to me, and you know, she wanted to shoot something with the family. She'd call me, and I'd go out. Or, you know, she just embraced us all as like her kids. You know, she was that type of person that, you know, it's like people say, man, you know, if you with that person, you down with me, you know. And she felt like that. We down with Kanye. She like, y'all all my sons, and she would actually, you know, treat us that way. And it was special. And then, you know, when she made a transition, that was really hard for everybody. But I know Kanye, you know, just their relationship and how they are. Chike could speak a lot on that, because he has the same type of relationship with, you know, single mother, you know, only child. Chike, you could speak on.
Yeah, no, I mean, just definitely, like, you know, my mother and my aunt, they poured so much into me. And that was, it was that their belief in me, it was more than an average mother. I have a relationship with my mother and my aunt that I feel like is not typical, but should be typical. I feel like it's sort of like the duty of a parent to recognize sort of your abilities. They brought you into this world, like, recognize your abilities and be the ones to actually, you know, water them. You know, my mother watered me every day and put me in position to be great based upon her recognizing what I did and what I was good at. And I felt like that was the same thing that Kanye did with his mother. Like, I feel like Kanye and I related to one another so much because we were the things that we were into in the arts. Our mother specifically made sure they nurtured. You know what I mean? And so what Coodie's kind of getting to is that relationship that I had with my mother. And I can only imagine losing my mother now. That would have a great effect to my psyche. You know what I'm saying? Psychologically, I don't know what that would do, but I know it would have a huge impact. So I can only imagine Kanye lose his money at a much earlier age, unexpectedly, what that would do to him psychologically and the amount of healing that would be necessary to come back from that. You know? Yes,
and I can completely relate to the point you make there, because my father isn't in the house now. He's just a couple of kilometers away, so it's, you know, not some horrible tragic story. but you can definitely tell, the love and adoration that a mother, and perhaps, especially a single mother, because they have to make up for the father in the house at times. And, especially for myself, at least, I was watching that first episode and, when Donda comes on screen and you're going, that's my mother. That's the same level of joy and ambition that she would instill in me. And so it sounds like to both of you, you could relate quite well to Donda.
Just knowing her, and then, and like understanding, have a perspective that our spirits never die, and like with my father who has made this transition, when you have that perspective to understand that our family members, our loved ones will be with us, forever, you know what I mean? Because, all of our spirits live forever. And it depends on what side of your spirit that you are. If you're like a negative person, then, you can go to a negative space. But if you're a positive person, you can go into a positive space. And I feel like, and I know that Donda, my father, Chike father, and, all of our ancestors been looking out for us, from birth, and of course, God and Jesus Christ.
And if I can also just touch on Kanye's creative process, because I thought that was also really illuminating. I don't think you would ever read that in a book. He's got TVs going on, there's a pool table, there's loads of people coming in and out. It is non-stop action and sensation and kind of stimulation, but somehow he manages to take all of that energy and put it into some of the most incredible songs of all time. As two creatives, I'm sure you must have looked at that and been quite interested and perhaps taken that in some of your own processes.
Yeah. And, just even being there, I always thought Kanye had a crazy work ethic, but watching all that footage, I'm like, so did I. But it was, when you're creative and moving in your passion, your purpose, man, it's all fun. You know what I mean? So regardless to what, you just being creative and having a ball and things come out of it. That's great, and that's all that Kanye was doing then, and all of us, what I'm saying, me and Chike, and when we get together and come up with treatments and write stuff and film stuff, whatever, it's a lot of work. But like I said, you in your passion, it don't even feel like work. It feel like you just, having fun. I guess that's probably like a lot of NBA players who love playing basketball. They play it after work. You know what I mean? Like paid. So it's a love, man, and that's what everybody needs to find that passion. Genius is not me, Kanye, Chike, or Jay Ivy, or it's everybody everybody has a genius in them. They just got to figure that out, and move on it, So.
Did you find that, Chike, that perhaps your approach to creativity maybe shifted when you got a little closer to Kanye and you've seen that he took a kind of, a more interesting approach with the TVs on and lots of people, collaboration, kind of action the whole time?
Not so much, because I feel like as a creative, like our process is very similar. Like Kanye and I that's where we connected, was as artists, was on that level. We would get behind the computer and we would kind of nerd out on like typography and different websites like Show Studio and whatnot. And we would look at different other motion graphic houses to see what they were doing. So I feel like that's what we do have in common, is trying to figure out. And I think at that point, Kanye just has a little bit more financial resources. So he's able to curate the most amazing, creative playground for an artist. And I think that's what he did with that space. So in a sense, that space that he's curated out there when he was in Wyoming, to me, I would feel like a kid in the candy store with that type of stimulation, constantly being around and being able to draw from. So, he definitely got an up on me on that. But once I get my resources together, we'll create a space similar.
The other interesting thing was Jamie Foxx and LA. That whole kind of LA excursion was really interesting. Even the fast food restaurant, where one of the crew, I can't remember who, but starts kind of telling the table beside him that Kanye is famous, and they're going, "This guy's famous? I don't think he's famous." And then of course you have the recording studio then as well, where the label won't open up the purse to actually allow Kanye to go and record. So he starts leaning on his friends to manage to make his dream a reality. I just thought that whole LA sequence was fascinating.
Oh, yeah. That was actually old school Ice Cream, who was just in the room talking. But I'm like, be quiet. That was the same person. It's hilarious. But yeah, you know, it's man, it's a team. It take a team, man, to you know, it always take a team no matter what. So a lot of times you just don't see that good when we put the movie out, that they see all of these people came together and believed in someone and all moved in and used their, you know, their knowledge and wisdom to help that person, you know, and that's what all of us did.
Chike, 300.
If I ask the question.
Yeah, Chike, 330 hours of footage. I mean, how did you even begin to sort through that? It must have been just head-wrecking.
I mean, you know, we had been studying story because we were writing screenplays. Nina Bon Jovi, a big producer out here in LA, put us up onto this book, Story by Robert McKee. And so we read it, and I think it was just the perfect timing. We always say everything we've done in our past was preparation for this moment to make this film. And so it was in studying that, we just got such a great understanding of stories. So like looking at this footage, and Coodie already had an idea just from, Coodie has like a photographic memory when it comes to everything he's ever shot. So I believe in his mind, he already had an idea for how the story would flow. But, you know, after reading story and coming up with a clear idea of our protagonist's journey, in this case, it was a dual, you know, protagonist within Coodie and Kanye. Once we understood what their journey was going to be and what, you know, their goal was going to be, and, you know, with story, it's just about moving every beat forward. So it makes it easy for you to realize what can't be in a story. So basically, you're only keeping things that are moving your story forward to your protagonist's goals. So it kind of makes it easier to kill your darling, so to speak. It makes it easy to look through 300 hours of footage and actually see which pieces of footage are going to be necessary to tell this story. We have so much footage. We could have gone down so many different rabbit holes, but it would have just taken you in different directions. You know what I'm saying? Mm. So
do you have much more footage of Kanye in the studio and kind of during the process? Because at least for myself, I found that particularly enthralling to watch essentially Mozart or Beethoven while they are in real time producing a classic.
Yeah, and we might, and you know, God willing, we be able to show the whole sessions of, you know, but like Chike said, we had to move the story forward, so we had to keep moving. But you know, just
Coodie filmed some epic sessions that we had to take out of there. Like he had one with Tiana Taylor that hurt to take out. There were sessions where you see in Kanye construct the beat from start to finish that hurt to take out. You know what I mean? Yeah. So
what you think about if we was to do like a 24-hour movie? You think that'll work?
I think I'd watch it anyway, and I'm sure there's probably 1 million or 2 people that are just mad Kanye fans who would absolutely love it. It shines just such an incredible light on Kanye, and the whole project, I think, is an absolute celebration of Kanye and both of yours work ethic to get it to that point. Now, of course, there was a little bit of kind of foray or controversy just before the release because Kanye seemed to want to have a bit of control, and you both said, well, you know, this is our project and you can't step in. Is that roughly how that kind of interaction went?
Yeah, well, when I met with him in DR and no, actually in Wyoming, and I just really let him know that you have to trust me on this. The same way you trust us on Through the Wire, the video, you have to trust us on this and let us make the story that's, you know, a non-biased story on his journey. And I told him, because we already had a cut done, I said, this is not about you. You know what I'm saying? This is for the dreamers. This is for the people that's striving to get somewhere and letting them know that you can get there. Just follow your genius. And he agreed. And then when we got the call, was a text that said he wanted the creative control like a week before we were going in theaters. You know, that was disappointing, but I just said to myself, trust God. And I said, Chike, we got to trust God. And that it worked out. You know, we can't, you know, it was almost like, it was actually on my birthday and I almost fainted when I got the text. And I'm like, wait a minute, the lion is not about to knock my head off. Why am I feeling this way? I know God always bring us through everything. So whatever he got planned. So I just laid back and trusted that. And of course you see it out on Netflix. You know, and Kanye was happy about it and thanked us a couple of times. So, you know, and it was important for the world to see Kanye. Definitely at this moment and the things that he's going through now, they need to see this person that and understand really no excuses, but little things that's why he might be the way he is. You know what I'm saying? Like Chike said, losing a parent or definitely someone so close. That like GLC said in Spaceships. GLC said, "Lost my mama, lost my mind." That's in Spaceship. That's before Mama West made a transition. GLC mom passed before that. So, but we got through it. Yeah.
You definitely got through it, and millions of people watching it and loving it. Chike, have you had a conversation with Kanye? And what does he think? Is he happy with it? Because to be honest with you, it would be hard to find fault, at least from my perspective. It shows him in generally quite a positive light.
Yeah, no, I haven't had any personally, but everything has been really through Coodie's correspondence. So, but at the same time, I did see him at that same premiere and was able, and his thank you was felt. And I feel like, I'm still not sure if he saw all three, but we know he saw the first one. And I definitely feel this is the type of project that, because of especially the third film, you got to respect his time and when he wants to really kind of dive into that, because I think we don't have to experience this on the level that he's going to have to experience it on when he watches it. So I just respect his space of if he's seen them all or when he's going to watch them all,
Exactly. Well, I want to say again a huge thank you to both of you. It's been phenomenal to talk to you, two massive directors who produced such a brilliant and interesting piece. What do you guys have coming up next?
Oh man, we have the Ernie Barnes documentary that we're doing. Ernie Barnes, the painter. It was a show Good Times, a sitcom that came on in the 70s, and he was the painter for the intro, which the intro name of the paint is The Sugar Shack. And he also, all the paints that the character JJ in the show was an artist in the show. He did was Ernie Barnes, and Ernie Barnes did the Marvin Gaye album cover, and a bunch of album covers, Curtis Mayfield. But that's the next doc. I actually documented him paint for Kanye called A Life Restored. And so you're gonna get Ernie Barnes' full process from sketches to the unveiling.
Tell him how much Ernie Barnes' last painting has been for, though.
So the Sugar Shack in Christie's Gallery in New York, they estimated the Sugar Shack to go from $150,000 to $200,000. That was the estimate. And by the end of the auction, which was like all of a sudden became a football game in the auction, there was people going at it. It went for $15 million.
Wow, that's incredible. $15 million.
Yeah, Bill Perkins, the only person that I interviewed at the unveiling, because so many people walked past and looked at the painting before the auction, and the only person that I just interviewed was Bill Perkins, who actually won the painting. So
perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, we'll all look forward to that. And, as I say again, it's been a pleasure talking to both of you. Thanks so much. Well, that was Coodie and Chike. Phenomenal, incredible guys. And definitely I'll be keeping an eye out for their next project. Now it's time for Kyle. Well, Kyle, let me say, for the first time ever, finally, Kyle, something that was... I'm going to use the term watchable, right? And that's the only term I may use throughout this, because it wasn't particularly gripping. It was good, but I was actually worried when you recommended that last week, or maybe it was a little while ago, that it was the same thing I had watched a couple of years ago. But in fact, you recommended what was an hour-and-a-half documentary about O.J. Simpson and the trial, your typical bog standard documentary. I had watched the 10-part dramatization done by FX in the States. And so I was actually a little worried when you recommended it. I was kind of going in the back of my head, don't say you've seen that now. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. I knew usually when these documentaries come out, there's 2 or 3 at a time, so I wasn't sure. But it was gripping for a period of time. It's interesting to see the actual people, especially when you have watched the dramatization. It's kind of fun to flip between both. It's almost like reading a book and then watching the film. I would say, personally, I thought it was dragged out a little bit much. Some of the background was interesting, but anybody out there, I would definitely say go with the dramatization, the 10 episodes on FX, which is a bit more like, it's like kind of like watching the Johnny Depp courtroom trial. It's much more focused on those stakes and that tension. The OJ Made in America documentary, I felt, was a little less high action, high octane.
Yeah, I got to watch this, I think, during the lockdown, and really, I'm a big fan of true crime, and I'll always take the real people over the dramatization. I know that the OJ trial got a lot of big press in terms of the actual event, and then the dramatized series, I think David Schwimmer starred in it alongside Cuba Gooding Jr., and I haven't actually seen that, but again, I would be more for watching interviews around the real people and hearing the story of people who actually were there with him, rather than watching someone play the role on screen. I do agree that, there didn't need to be, I think there's 8 episodes in total. Even I thought near the end it was dragging it out. But again, I think it's good to see the full scope of things, like you mentioned, and see the real people up close and the ins and outs, the backgrounds of what was going on in his life at that time, and getting an insider's point of view of his mental state leading up to the event and throughout his career.
Completely. And as a character, it doesn't matter what form the footage takes, or the documentary or the TV show or whatever. If you shot anything about OJ on a Nokia, it would still be fascinating, because he is such an interesting character in terms of, having it all and then basically masterminding your own destruction, but somehow still managing to, even in that scenario, remain this incredible figure, this figure who I think most people would accept cheated the law. Certainly the civil case of 2005 came to that conclusion. And now he is back and he's on Twitter, which is the other interesting thing. And I was actually reading up on it. Yeah. When he joined Twitter, his first video, he starts out like this.
I got a little...
Wait, actually, sorry, the other one.
Hey, Twitter world. Hey, Twitter world.
So he starts off like that, hey, Twitter world. But just 20 seconds in, he's already saying...
I got a little getting even to do.
So the guy that possibly killed 2 people, his first video is introduction to Twitter, and in many respects is his kind of reintroduction to the modern world. He is saying he's got a little getting even to do.
It's absolutely insane, and I think, watching this documentary, I wasn't privy to the personality of O.J. Simpson growing up. I didn't grow up watching him. Obviously we're not from the States. We don't idolize him the way other people would have, being an ex-football player and a Heisman Trophy winner. I know that he was idolized for his athleticism in the game, but he is just batshit crazy in this documentary at times. And you're just playing a snippet from his Twitter videos. But I know, personally, and I hopefully you agree, that looking at this documentary, you get a full scope of his lunacy at times. I don't know whether it's the end of the documentary, but he has a connection to the Kardashian family. Obviously, he was great friends with
Robert Kardashian. The lawyer. OJ is one of the Kardashians' godfather.
I think it's Kim.
There's a lot of connection there, in many respects, that whole trial really shows a lot of the kind of modern world we live in. You've got the 24/7 news, which OJ wasn't the start of, but certainly you could say he fueled a lot of it and kept the 24/7 news going as a concept, which in turn meant that everything became a news story and polarization gradually happened. And then, of course, you have the Kardashians, who somehow managed to kind of turn this court case, along with a few other pieces, into this kind of mega phenomena and you could say almost invent reality TV, or certainly give it its lifeblood. So, I mean, you know, to take O.J. Simpson and the Made in America O.J. documentary at a little bit more of a macro level, it's a fascinating portrayal of the modern world.
And just looking at him near the end of that documentary, you kind of see how out of touch he is becoming with the media, with what's popular. Because there's one clip where he sees that the Keeping Up with the Kardashians has started, and he's watching a interview with Kim and Kourtney and the rest of them on Oprah. And I just love this clip so much because of how far that show went. He turns to the camera and he turns to his friend and he goes, "That won't last a week." And I just, like you said, it's the way the world has gone now with media covering things 24/7. I don't know if that OJ trial was the first trial that was fully documented on live TV, but I do know that it was one of the more divisive trials, and it really split the American public down the middle of whether he was going to be found innocent or guilty for that trial.
Apparently, he some reports suggest that he actually is her godfather. In a 2008 Los Angeles Times article, Simpson was quoted as calling her, quote, "my goddaughter," and saying, quote, "I was in the hospital when she was born." In her TV show, Kim Kardashian refers to Simpson saying, "I mean, he is my godfather." So, I mean, such a man to have as a godfather. Like, usually your godfather gives you a few extra euro on your communion day and maybe buys you your first pint. Doesn't kill a load of people and then kind of give you massive worldwide fame. But the O.J. Simpson documentary there, worth a watch, I think, but I would certainly suggest to anybody that is interested in that kind of thing to first go and watch the dramatization on FX. I felt it was a little bit easier and maybe a little bit more detached from reality in terms of you weren't constantly facing the fact that this guy had killed people, whereas in the dramatization it's a little lighter. I mean, it's still kind of heavy, but it's not exactly one of those true crime novels or books or podcasts that make you want to just slit your own throat after reading them. Yeah.
I think, one thing I would say about this documentary series is, like you said, Jack, the dramatization is a bit easier to watch, a bit easier to stomach. There are some scenes in OJ Made in America where they do go into detail around the murder, and there are crime scene photos publicized in the documentary because obviously they cover the trial as well and they were exposed in the trial. So if you are a bit squeamish around that, the reality is hitting you hard in the face of the brutal murder.
If you're a bit squeamish, firstly, get rid of your phone.
Yeah.
Because like everything, you could be exposed to. 5-year-olds are watching like ISIS beheading videos at this point. So if you're a little squeamish, but both, to be honest with you, are quite in your face. If you're a bit squeamish, watch Mickey Mouse or something, because this really isn't for you. Speaking of for you, Boyhood, the 2014 Richard Linklater film. It's the one I recommended to you last we spoke, Kyle. It's one of my favorites. How did it fare up?
Okay, first of all, the concept around this movie, that's one of my biggest compliments to it. I hadn't seen this movie before. I had heard about the concept around it. Obviously, the concept being it's shot over 12 years. They didn't replace the actors, which movies like this normally do. They'll normally hire maybe 3 or 4 actors to play the same character throughout the years. So obviously, a young Mason, and then replaced by another actor to play the teenage years and then the adult version. This was a movie that decided to stick with the 4 actors involved, which is Patricia Arquette, Ethan Hawke, L.R. Coltrane, and Lorelei Linklater as well. And we get to see, especially L.R. Coltrane and Lorelei Linklater, grow up and blossom as adult actors as well, and see what kind of actors they turn out to be. The the one shining light is the concept around this movie. The acting was pretty good as well. It's seamless at times.
I don't like where this is going. I don't like where this is going.
No. Well, listen, I'm not a huge fan of Patricia Arquette. I'll say that off the cuff. I like Ethan Hawke in films as well. This movie, I think, it's more of a statement piece than anything. Again, like, there's great acting in it at times, and there's some relatable stories in it because it is about, you know, childhood and growing up and going through the trials and tribulations of the awkward years and being a teenager and things like that. There isn't a whole lot of rewatchability. The bloated runtime really got to me near the end. Like we mentioned when you suggested this, it's 2 hours 45 minutes if I'm correct. And I understand, you know, you mentioned it at the end of our last show as well. You can understand why it's that long, because if they wanted to pull this off, nothing could be left to chance, and they really couldn't second guess themselves when looking at what they should leave in or leave out. It is an interesting concept to watch the actors grow up on screen. There was times where I turned off, I got bored.
How many sittings? Did you watch it in the one sitting?
Over the course of one day, I think I got a free Saturday, and it was one of those days where I got everything done in the morning. So I just dedicated, you know, between like 12 and 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, I just sat down and I watched it in chunks. There was times where I paused it, went for a bite to eat, came back and watched the rest of it. And I think that's the whole downside to the bloated runtime. People are going to turn off, and as well as that, once you finish this movie, there's no. I know you may say it's one of your favorite movies, but I don't see myself having any urge to rewatch this movie in the near future. And I think it's one of those movies where you can watch it once, appreciate it for what it is. It is a unique film in what it brings to us. And I think it will stand the test of time because of the concept and the structure it decided to adapt. But overall, like, when you're rating movies and giving movies like a status of great or good or bad or shite, you want to look at all different areas. So rewatchability, acting, obviously, story structure. The story structure was there. It was a bit boring at times. There was mundane things to it. I thought Ella Coltrane did a great job in the lead role, but I wasn't overly attached to any of the characters, and that was a problem as well. I didn't feel myself really invested in their story, and
well, it's a still for anybody that hasn't seen or is thinking about it. It is none of them win the lotto. No one has a huge arc. The biggest arc really is the mother and her abusive husband for a period of time, and they don't even linger on that particularly long. I'd guess it's between about 15 and 30 minutes. It's not all just like Mike Tyson Holyfield. It's not all just some kind of domestic abuse caution video. It's just it's generally kind of an emotional thing, and you see it more from the child's perspective. But I just I particularly like the stillness. I don't always like still films, but I thought that it left you in a state of reality, which is kind of refreshing, because you see so much of the Iron Man and Loki and all these other things where the guy has to be from planet Kryptonite, and all of these exaggerated stories that feel very difficult. Whereas I think that, especially depending on your background, you could really find some kind of almost home for 2.5 hours with Boyhood. I will agree that at times it does drag on, especially there's a monologue, or kind of not even a monologue, a dialogue between the mother and it's kind of a repairman. and she's telling him to go to school and to kind of turn his life around.
Yeah.
And that was little bit Oprah Winfrey type stuff. It was just, it felt a little unnecessary. But as you say, if you shoot something for 12 years, you kind of have to go back to the studio and go, here is... They probably went back with much more than 2.5 hours, but at the very least, I think the studio would want to be turning over 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Yeah. And like I said, the concept alone, people should watch it for this. I'm not knocking the acting. The acting was seamless at times, like I mentioned. And because it doesn't linger on any moment, like you said, Jack, even the hard-hitting moments and the more serious moments, you know, the abusive relationships that the mother seems to find herself in. I think there was 2 relationships. One she married into, one was a boyfriend. They were both abusive in one way or the other. They don't linger on these moments, and I think the reason I didn't attach to any character in particular was because every moment was fleeting, and it was you could sense that every moment was just at arm's reach away, because they needed to get through as much as they can. And looking back on it, like you mentioned, they probably came back to the studio and the editing room with far more than 2 hours or 3 hours of footage. So the fact that this got made into a movie that is under 3 hours really is a miracle in itself. But overall, I think, like I said, this will stand the test of time because of what they pulled off and how seamless it is at times. But overall, I think this is a movie that didn't grip me with their characters. Again, it is mundane at times, but a good story was told and good acting involved. But overall, I think when I look at a movie, I want to grab on something and feel like, oh yeah, we did something with this character. This character got somewhere. But like you said, no one wins the lottery in the end. There's no major scene where a character decides, okay, I'm going to change my life for the better, or there's no big character arc. There is character development. One big plus to this movie, I thought, was they decided to have Ethan Hawke's character as a maybe on the weekend dad not stay that way. You know, we see him in the first scene with his kids, and he is the quintessential weekend dad in the way that he comes in. He doesn't stick to their diet that the mother wants them on. He brings them out bowling. He has them eat French fries from or chips from McDonald's, and keeps them out later than they should be. They haven't done their homework when they get back home, and it's all left for her to be the bad guy. And that, I think, is the quintessential stereotypical weekend dad that we see in these drama movies. But you see through the years, he becomes a less absent father, and when he's with them, he doesn't want the pleasantries. There's one scene in particular where they're in the car driving, and he's asking them how their week is, or like what's going on in their lives, and they just say, oh yeah, school is fine, and they're giving him kind of one-word answers, and he stops the car and says, I don't want to be that kind of father. Don't treat me that way. And I thought that was a great moment for his character.
It's hard not to fall in love with Ethan Hawke in this film. I think he does a fantastic portrayal. Yeah. And it's completely believable, that arc from kind of father who is father who, as you say, maybe weekend dad, or certainly is trying within his limits, but is also, he's kind of trying to live a duplicitous life. He's trying to have this kind of rock and roll lifestyle. He's got the flash muscle car, but he's also trying to be there for the kids from time to time. And then as you see towards the end of the film, he's got rid of the muscle car, and he is now completely a 7-seater dad. He's settled down. He's got a proper job. He's got a family of his own, and that progression feels completely natural. Whereas other times it can kind of feel like, you can see the Harley Davidson jacket through the whole thing. And even, when he's riding off into the camper, riding off into the distance in the family seater, 7-seater car, you can tell that, well, when this film ends, he's probably going to cheat on the wife, go and do a load of coke, and and leave the family. Whereas you don't get the sense, you get the sense that he actually wanted to change and changes for the better.
Yeah, this movie again, like, it's not going to be my favorite movie of all time, but I'm glad I watched it. I think it's definitely a masterpiece in cinematography. The filmography was, the cinematography was great at times, and it's definitely one movie I think everyone should watch, because it has achieved something that wasn't done before, and probably won't be replicated again. And it should be hailed for that alone. But again, there's seamless acting in it at times. It does come across like a documentary at times, because you actually buy these actors as these characters. And like you said, the likability of Ethan Hawke goes a long way. And L.R. Coltrane is charismatic at times in this movie. It was interesting to see how his charisma built in him, and he built that up as a growing actor. And by the time he's in his 20s in this movie, I think it's in his 20s when he's in college, he has a couple of monologues himself, and it's that I thought the latter half of the movie, I actually gripped onto that more, because there was more interesting conversations going on, and it wasn't just the monotonous weekend dad pickups and talking about school and going through the mundane relationships of high school and things like that. Another thing I really liked was the acknowledgement of cultural change through the 12 years, especially with music. So through each scene, Mason maybe 12 years old, and you hear the number one song from that era, whether it's Soulja Boy, or like Kylie Minogue or someone else, or like Robbie Williams. There's always some song playing in the background, almost as an intro to the next scene. And I think, that was a very good way to slice in the fact that, yes, we are getting a progression through the years, and that's the film's acknowledgement of that.
Yes, and what I particularly like about it, about the concept as well, is it's so true to life that it doesn't make you feel like you're lesser than the characters on screen. I'll expand on that a little bit, because sometimes if you're watching, I don't know, be it Home and Away or any thing where they depict like 16, 17, 18-year-olds, Malcolm in the Middle, any of those, what they actually generally are using are probably 20, 21, 22. Like some of the Modern Family stars, I just found out, would be playing 18-year-olds and themselves be 23 or 24. Now, while, if you're 50 or 60, maybe that doesn't sound like a big gap, but it actually is. And as a viewer, especially if you're near those ages, you compare yourself to those characters on screen and you're going, but I don't exactly look like that, or I don't talk like that, or I don't have the exact same personality or the same kind of way about myself. And I'm supposed to be the same age as this character, but in fact you're not the same age as the actor on screen. And so I felt in Boyhood it was much easier to relate to the characters on screen, and to think back to your own age, to think back, well, what was I doing when I was 15? Yeah, I looked a bit like that, and I talked a bit like that, and I thought a bit like that. Whereas in your sitcoms or any of your Home and Aways or any of those stuff where there is a disconnect between the age of the character and the age of the actor, you can sometimes come out feeling either a little shitty about yourself, or at the very least like there is quite a disconnect.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up. I think there's many actors out there. You brought up Modern Family. I think, a lot of those actors, they would be maybe 26, 25, and they're playing 19-year-olds. And I think, a lot of actors are probably sick of having young faces, because they're always brought in to play 20-year-olds when they're really 31 or 33. So I thought you make a good point that you're actually you can gravitate more towards the characters in this movie, and you can see that. You can see it's real. You can see it brings that sense of reality down and hits you in the face with it. And that's why I go back to the fact that it feels like a documentary. It feels like you're just watching these kids grow up, and in a way it doesn't feel like a film. It feels like we're just getting a little behind the scenes look of how this boy and girl grew up and the things that shaped their lives, which is why I think this movie is definitely one for every viewer to sit down and watch at some stage, because it is a masterclass in playing the long game, if you will, with filmmaking.
Yes. Well, I think it is one to definitely watch. Do you have a score for us on that?
I give it a 3.5 out of 5, simply because I did turn off at points. I did find it hard to grasp to any one character for longer than a couple of scenes. But overall, the concept is there. The acting is seamless. There's likability in the characters. Ethan Hawke's performance and L.R. Coltrane were excellent. And I would recommend watching this movie if you get a chance.
And personally, for me, on the O.J. Simpson one, I'd have to say
I got a little getting even to do.
It's about 4 out of 5. I love that sound clip because he knows exactly. It's the same.
It's so good.
You know, he was about to release a book called If I Done It. And the families sued him and threatened the publisher, and ultimately the book didn't get properly released, but it is out there as a 200-page PDF to read. And it's like, if you are accused of killing 2 people, do not release a book called If I Did It. That's so, that's so ridiculous. Anyway, coming up next week, Kyle, what will I be watching?
I had a few different ideas, but I jotted down here. But I'm going to go with a 2019 movie, Joker, starring Joaquin Phoenix, Robert De Niro, and Zazie Beetz.
I hate Joker. It's such a bad film. I don't know why you're subjecting me.
Oh, well, okay. So you've seen it.
I know. I'm gonna, Kyle. I will watch it again.
But no. If you've seen it, and there's no point in you've given away your preview film. There.
I mean,
you've given away your preview there.
They in the middle of it, they go, "Oh wait, that wasn't actually real." But then you're somehow supposed to believe the rest of the film is now like an accurate portrayal again. It's like, no, you just lied about his girlfriend as if the rest of it is real.
Okay, well, you just gave away your preview there, so I'm going to switch Joker because there's no point in subjecting it to misery, because I'm only going to hear guff about it next week. Dope Sick, the miniseries.
I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it, so that'll be interesting. It's on Disney Plus.
It's on Disney,
and it's
Plus,
the whole
and it's just
opioid crisis thing.
Yeah, it's the whole opioid crisis. It is a miniseries. I think there's 12, 13 episodes in total. I don't expect you to get through a lot of them before we talk next, but I think it is definitely a series that everyone should watch. It's been nominated for this upcoming Emmys, so I definitely think it's one that you'll enjoy.
Okay, Kyle, this week I will be subjecting you to Train Spotting. Have you seen it?
I have indeed. I haven't. But again, I'm not going to say anything about it. I am due for a rewatch. I've only seen the movie once.
Okay.
So,
or if you'd like, Kyle, you can watch T2, Trainspotting 2. That's the sequel that came out in 2018 or something like that. I don't know if you've seen that one. Perhaps that'd be a substitute.
You know what? I'll watch Trainspotting again because I haven't watched it in a couple of years. I think I watched it back when I'm 28 now. I think I watched it when I was 23, 24. So I'm due for a rewatch. And sure, I might end up watching Trainspotting 2 off the cuff.
Perfect. Well, I can tell you I won't end up watching The Joker because it is a wholly stupid film made for idiots. Thank you. Good night. Well, that's all for this week. Thanks so much, folks, for listening, for watching, and for subscribing. We'll see you next week.